Dances with Wolves is a 1990 American epic western film directed, produced by, and starring Kevin Costner. It is a film adaptation of the 1988 book of the same name by Michael Blake and tells the story of a Union Army lieutenant who travels to the American frontier to find a military post, and his dealings with a group of Lakota Indians. Costner developed the film over a period of 5 years, with an initial budget of $15 million. Dances with Wolves had high production values and won 7 Academy Awards including Best Picture and the Golden Globe Award for Best Motion Picture a Eurodrama. Much of the dialogue is spoken in Lakota with English subtitles. It was shot in South Dakota and Wyoming, and translated by Albert Whitehat, the chair of the Lakota Studies Department at Sinte Gleska University. The film is credited as a leading influence for the revitalization of the Western genre of filmmaking in Hollywood. In 2007, Dances with Wolves was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Plot: in 1863, First Lieutenant John J. Dunbar is wounded in the American Civil War. Choosing suicide over having his leg amputated, he takes a horse and rides up to the Confederate front lines, distracting them in the process. The roused Union Army then attacks and the battle ends in a Confederate rout. Dunbar survives, is allowed to recover properly, receives a citation for bravery, and is awarded Cisco, the horse who carried him, as well as his choice of posting. Dunbar requests a transfer to the western frontier so he can see its vast terrain before it disappears. Dunbar arrives at his new post, Fort Sedgwick, but finds it abandoned and in disrepair. Despite the threat of nearby Indian tribes, he elects to stay and man the post himself. He begins rebuilding and restocking the fort and prefers the solitude afforded him, recording many of his observations in his journal. Meanwhile Timmons, the wagon driver who transported Dunbar to Fort Sedgwick, is killed and scalped by Pawnee Indians on his way back to Fort Hays. Timmons's death and the suicide of Major Fambraw, who had sent them there, prevents other soldiers from knowing of Dunbar's assignment to the post, effectively isolating him. Dunbar notes in his journal of how strange it is that no other soldiers join him at the post. Dunbar initially encounters his Sioux neighbors when several attempts are made to steal his horse and intimidate him. In response, Dunbar decides to seek out the Sioux camp in an attempt to establish a dialogue. On his way he comes across Stands with a Fist, who is attempting suicide in mourning her deceased husband. She is the white, adopted daughter of the tribe's medicine man Kicking Bird, her original family having been killed by the aggressive Pawnee tribe when she was young. Dunbar returns her to the Sioux to be treated, which changes their attitude towards him. Eventually, Dunbar establishes a rapport with Kicking Bird and Warrior Wind in his hair who equally wish to communicate. Initially the language barrier frustrates them, so Stands with a Fist, though with difficulty remembering her English, acts as translator. Dunbar finds himself drawn to the lifestyle and customs of the tribe and begins spending most of his time with them. Learning their language, he is accepted as an honored guest by the Sioux after he locates a migrating herd of buffalo and participates in the hunt. When at Fort Sedgwick, Dunbar also befriends a wolf he dubs Two Socks for its white forepaws. When the Sioux observe Dunbar and Two Socks chasing each other, they give him the name Dances with Wolves. During this time, Dunbar also forges a romantic relationship with Stands with a Fist and helps defend the village from an attack by the rival Pawnee tribe. Dunbar eventually wins Kicking Bird's approval to marry Stands with a Fist, and abandons Fort Sedgwick. Because of the growing Pawnee and White threat, Chief Ten Bears decides to move the tribe to its winter camp. Dunbar decides to accompany them but must first retrieve his journal from Fort Sedgwick as he realizes that it would provide the army with the means of finding the tribe. However, when he arrives he finds the fort reoccupied by the U.S. Army. Because of his Sioux clothing, the soldiers open fire, killing Cisco and capturing Dunbar, arresting him as a traitor. Senior officers interrogate him, but Dunbar cannot prove his story, as a corporal has found and discarded his journal. Having refused to serve as an interpreter to the tribes, Dunbar is charged with desertion and transported back east as a prisoner. Soldiers of the escort shoot two Sox when the wolf attempts to follow Dunbar, despite Dunbar's attempts to intervene. Eventually the Sioux track the convoy, killing the soldiers and freeing Dunbar. At the winter camp, Dunbar decides to leave with stands with a fist, since his continuing presence will put the tribe in danger. As they leave, Wind in his hair shouts to Dunbar, reminding him of their friendship. U.S. troops are seen searching the mountains but are unable to locate them, while a lone wolf howls in the distance. An epilogue states that 13 years later the last remnants of the Free Sioux were subjugated to the American government, ending the conquest of the western frontier states and the livelihoods of the tribes on the plains. Cast. Production. Originally written as a spec script by Michael Blake, it went unsold in the mid-1980s. However, Kevin Costner had starred in Blake's only previous film, Stacy's Nights, and encouraged Blake in early 1986 to turn the Western's screenplay into a novel to improve its chances of being produced. The novel version of Dances with Wolves was rejected by numerous publishers but finally published in paperback in 1988. As a novel, the rights were purchased by Costner, with an eye on directing it. Actual production lasted for 4 months, from July 18 to November 23, 1989. Most of the movie was filmed on location in South Dakota, mainly on private ranches near Pierre and Rapid City, with a few scenes filmed in Wyoming. Specific locations included the Badlands National Park, the Black Hills, the Sage Creek Wilderness Area, and the Belfish River area. The bison hunt scenes were filmed at the Triple U Buffalo Ranch outside Fort Pierre, South Dakota, as were the Fort Sedgwick scenes, the set being constructed on the property. Production delays were numerous, because of South Dakota's unpredictable weather, the difficulty of directing barely trainable wolves, and the complexity of the Indian battle scenes. Particularly arduous was the film's centerpiece bison hunt sequence. This elaborate chase was filmed over 3 weeks using 100 Indian stunt riders and an actual stampeding herd of several thousand bison. During one shot, Costner was T-boned by another rider and knocked off his horse, nearly breaking his back. The accident is captured in the creation of an epic, the behind-the-scenes documentary on the Dances with Wolves Special Edition DVD and Blu-ray. According to the documentary, none of the bison were computer animated and only a few were animatronic or otherwise fabricated. In fact, Costner and crew employed the largest domestically owned bison ranch, with 2 of the tame bison being borrowed from Neil Young. This was the herd used for the bison hunt sequence. Budget overruns were inevitable, owing to Costner's breaking several unspoken Hollywood rules for first-time directors. Traditionally, they avoid both shooting outside and working with children and animals as much as possible. As a result, late in the production Costner was forced to add $3 million personally in out-of-pocket money to the film's original $15 million budget. Referring to the infamous fiasco of Michael Cimino's 1980 Heaven's Gate, considered the most mismanaged Western in film history, Costner's project was satirically dubbed Kevin's Gate by Hollywood critics and pundits skeptical of a 3-hour, partially subtitled Western by a novice filmmaker. The film changed the novel's Comanche Indians to Sioux, because of the larger number of Sioux speakers. Lakota Sioux language instructor Doris Leadercharge was the on-set Lakota dialogue coach and also portrayed Pretty Shield, wife of Chief Ten Bears. Despite portraying the adopted daughter of Graham Greene's character Kicking Bird, Mary McDonnell, then 37, was actually 2 months older than Greene, and less than 2 years younger than Tantu Cardinal, the actress playing her adoptive mother. In addition, McDonnell was extremely nervous about shooting her sex scene with Kevin Costner, requesting it be toned down to a more modest version than what was scripted. Reception: defying expectation, Dances with Wolves proved instantly popular, eventually earning great critical acclaim, and making $184 million in U.S. box office sales and $424 million in total sales worldwide. As of 2014, the film holds a positive review score of 81% on Rotten Tomatoes. Because of the film's popular and lasting impact on the image of Native Americans, the Sioux Nation adopted Costner as an honorary member. At the 63rd Academy Awards ceremony in 1991, Dances with Wolves earned 12 Academy Award nominations and won 7, including Best Writing, Adapted Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Picture of the Year. In 2007, the Library of Congress selected Dances with Wolves for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. Native American activist and actor Russell Means was less kind about some aspects of the film's technical accuracy. In 2009, he said, "Remember Lawrence of Arabia? That was Lawrence of the Plains. The odd thing about making that movie is that they had a woman teaching the actors the Lakota language, but Lakota has a male-gendered language and a female-gendered language. Some of the Indians and Kevin Costner were speaking in the feminine way. When I went to see it with a bunch of Lakota guys, we were laughing." Other Native Americans like Michael Smith, director of San Francisco's long-running annual American Indian Film Festival, said, "There's a lot of good feeling about the film in the Indian community, especially among the tribes. I think it's going to be very hard to top this one." According to other sources, the gender-specific Lakota words were used correctly in the movie. Some of the criticism was inspired by the fact that the pronunciation is not authentic since only one of the movie's actors was a native speaker of the language. The movie's dialogues in the native language has been lauded as a remarkable achievement. However, other writers have noted that earlier otherwise English-language films such as Eskimo, Wagon Master, and The White Dawn, had also incorporated native dialogue. David Sirota of Salon referred to Dances with Wolves as a white savior film, as Dunbar effully embeds himself in the Sioux tribe and quickly becomes its primary protector. He argued that its use of the a noble savage character type preemptively blunts criticism of the underlying white savior story. The idea is that a film like Dances with Wolves cannot be bigoted or overly white-centric if it at least shows characters such as Kicking Bird and Chief 10 Bears as special and exceptional. This, even though the whole story is about a white guy who saves the day. Conservative writer Richard Grenier was strongly critical of the film. Grenier accused Costner of misrepresenting the Sioux as peaceful, claiming that the film's portrait of the Sioux, the most bloodthirsty of all Plains Indian tribes and neither pacifists nor environmentalists, is false in every respect. Awards and honors. In addition to becoming the first Western film to win an Academy Award for Best Picture since 1931, Cimarron, Dances with Wolves won the following additional awards, thereby being established as one of the most honored films of 1990, American Film Institute recognition, AFI's 100 Years. 100 Movies number 75, AFI's 100 Years. 100 Heroes and Villains, Lieutenant John J. Dunbar nominated hero. AFI's 100 Years of Film Scores nominated, AFI's 100 Years. 100 Cheers number 59, AFI's 100 Years. 100 Movies nominated, AFI's 10 Top 10 nominated Western and Epic Film. Other accolades, Silver Bear for an Outstanding Single Achievement Kevin Costner at the 41st Berlin International Film Festival, sequel, The Holy Road, a well-received sequel novel by Michael Blake, the author of both the original Dances with Wolves novel and the movie screenplay, was published in 2001. It picks up 11 years after Dances with Wolves. John Dunbar is still married to Stands with a Fist and they have 3 children. Stands with a Fist and one of the children are kidnapped by a party of white rangers and Dances with Wolves must mount a rescue mission. As of 2007, Blake was writing a film adaptation, although Kevin Costner was not yet attached to the project. In the end, however, Costner stated he would not take part in this production. Viggo Mortensen has been rumored to be attached to the project, playing Dunbar. Historical references. Judith A. Porter wrote, "The problem with Costner's approach is that all of the Sioux are heroic, while the Pawnees are portrayed as stereotypical villains. Most accounts of Sioux-Pawnee relations see the Pawnees as victims of the more powerful Sioux. St. David's Field, Tennessee does not exist, nor did it in 1863. As the opening battle is a minor portion of the film, it was considered undesirable to name an actual historical battle, which might result in knowledgeable viewers taking exception to fictional events." Fort Sedgwick, Colorado was erected as Camp Rankin and renamed for General John Sedgwick. Sedgwick was killed May 9, 1864, at the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, Virginia. Fort Sedgwick served as an Army post from July 1864 to May 1871. John Sedgwick did erect a fort in Kansas in 1860. Fort Hays, Kansas was named for General Alexander Hays. Hays was killed May 5, 1864, in the Battle of the Wilderness, Virginia. Fort Hays served as an Army post from October 11, 1865, to November 8, 1889. There was a real John Dunbar who worked as a missionary for the Pawnee in the 1830s-40s, and sided with the Indians in a dispute with government farmers and a local Indian agent. It is unclear whether the name John Dunbar was chosen as a corollary to the real historical figure. The fictional Lieutenant John Dunbar of 1863 is correctly shown in the film wearing a gold bar on his officer's shoulder straps, indicating his rank as a first lieutenant. From 1836 to 1872, the rank of first lieutenant was indicated by a gold bar. After 1872, the rank was indicated by a silver bar. Similarly, Captain Cargill is correctly depicted wearing a pair of gold bars, indicating the rank of captain at that time. In an interview, author and screenwriter Michael Blake said that Stands with a Fist, the white captive woman who marries Dunbar, was actually based upon the story of Cynthia Ann Parker, the white girl captured by Comanches and mother of Quina Parker. Ten Bears' account of his grandfather's driving out the Spanish conquistadors and later the War on Mexico and then Texas is more the history of the novel Southern Great Plains Comanche tribe. In the northern Great Plains, the Eastern Sioux had already lost the Dakota War of 1862 with the United States and were driven out of Minnesota to Nebraska and South Dakota. The Sioux were more successful during the Colorado War of 1863 to 1865. The epilogue is correct. 13 years after the film is set, after the Great Sioux War of 1876, the last band of Free Sioux surrendered at Fort Robinson, Nebraska, and the dominance and prevalence of the Plains Indians was over. The last conflict was the Ghost Dance War 1890–1891 which involved the Wounded Knee Massacre. Home video editions. The first Laserdisc release of Dances with Wolves was on November 15, 1991, by Orion Home Video in a 2-disc extended play set. The first Dances with Wolves VHS version was released in 1991. It was subsequently issued in several further VHS versions. The limited collector's edition set comes with 2 VHS tapes, 6 high-gloss 14 by 11-inch lobby photos, Dances with Wolves, the illustrated story of the epic film book, and an organized collector's edition storage case. Dances with Wolves has been released to DVD on 4 occasions, the first on November 17, 1998, on a single disc. The second on February 16, 1999, as a 2-disc set with a DTS soundtrack. The third was released on May 20, 2003, as a 2-disc set featuring the extended edition. And the fourth was released on May 25, 2004, as a single disc in full frame. Dances with Wolves was released on Blu-ray in Germany on December 5, 2008, in France on April 15, 2009, in the United Kingdom on October 26, 2009, and in the United States on January 11, 2011. The German, French, and American releases feature the extended edition, while the British release features the theatrical cut. Alternate versions. 1 year after the original theatrical release of Dances with Wolves, a 4-hour version of the film opened at select theatres in London. This longer cut was dubbed Dances with Wolves, the special edition, and it restored nearly an hour's worth of scenes that had been removed to keep the original film's running time under 3 hours. In a letter to British film reviewers, director Kevin Costner and producer Jim Wilson addressed their reasons for presenting a longer version of the film. Upon the release of the 4-hour Dances with Wolves, the question naturally arises, why? Why add another hour to a film that by most standards pushes the time limit of conventional movie making? We opted to produce an extended version of Dances with Wolves for several reasons. The 52 additional minutes that represent this new version were difficult to cut in the first place. the opportunity to introduce them to audiences is compelling. We have received countless letters from people worldwide asking when or if a sequel would be made, so it seemed like a logical step to enhance our film with existing footage. Virtually every character is richer, from the teamster, Timmons, to the tribal chief, Ten Bears. Making an extended version is by no means to imply that the original Dances with Wolves was unfinished or incomplete. Rather, it creates an opportunity for those who fell in love with the characters and the spectacle of the film to experience more of both. We hope you enjoy it. The genesis of the 4-hour version of the film was further explained in an article for Entertainment Weekly that appeared only 10 months after the premiere of the original film. While the small screen has come to serve as a second chance for filmmakers who can't seem to let their babies go, Kevin Costner and his producing partner, Jim Wilson, hope that their newly completed version will hit theater screens first. "I spent 7 months working on it," Wilson says of the expanded Wolves. He's quick to defend the Oscar-winning version as the best picture we had in us at the time, yet Wilson also says he's ecstatic over the recut. "It's a brand new picture," he insists. "There's now more of a relationship between Kevin and Stans with a fist, more with the wolf, more with the Indians, stuff that's integral all through the story." Of course, exhibitors may not want a longer version of an already widely seen movie, but Wilson remains optimistic. "I don't think the time is now," he acknowledges, "but ideally, there is a point at which it would come out with an intermission, booked into the very best venues in America." A premiere in the form of a 2-night network miniseries is also a possibility. For now, however, the 4-hour Wolves remains a private dancer. This special edition was eventually broadcast in 1993 for the American network television premiere at ABC. For the DVD release, the special edition was dubbed an extended cut. For Blu-ray, the same cut was renamed Director's Cut. Director Kevin Costner would later claim that he did not work on the creation of the 4-hour cut at all. Soundtrack. John Barry composed the Oscar-winning score. It was issued in 1990 initially and again in 1995 with bonus tracks and in 2004 with the score in its entirety. Peter Buffett scored the fire dance scene. See also: White Savior narrative in film, bibliography, Blake, Michael. Dances with Wolves. Ballantine Books. ISBN A0-449-00075-3. Blake, Michael. The Holy Road. ZOVA Books. ISBN A978-0-615-51057-6. Notes. References. External links. Archived website http, webarchive.org, Dances with Wolves at the Internet Movie Database, Dances with Wolves at the TCM Movie Database, Dances with Wolves at AllMovie, Dances with Wolves at Rotten Tomatoes.